Since I didn't have time to answer all the questions during the webinar, I thought I'd try to answer some more of them now. So the first question, what does a robot that you built do on the ISS? And that was Robonaut. And right now it doesn't do much, it's just a prototype. But the idea is in the future that it will help astronauts do their work inside the space station and outside the space station. The idea is it will be able to handle commands like hold this or move to over here. And it also had the ability to kind of hook up to somebody who has a virtual headset on and gloves on, and they can then do the task, and the robot will mimic what they're doing. So if they could even be on the ground, and they could then help you as an astronaut on board do things during your task. This would definitely be advantageous for while you're out on a spacewalk to have something like that to help you hold things, hold tools, hold equipment, etc., and help do many different things while you're out there. And so that's the future goal of Robonaut. It's just not there yet, and it's in its early stages and trying to figure out how it's going to work. Next question is how do you get power or Wi-Fi to the ISS for sending emails home and calling friends and family? We have satellites that NASA uses to do all the communication, and they're spaced around the Earth in a way that we can pretty much have communication most of the time if needed. We don't use them all the time because they're actually expensive to use, so we only use them part-time. But the idea with when we have the availability, we have then the idea then to have a system where our com links will have part of that channel will be done to us for data for our emails and for making phone calls, kind of like basically an audio Skype. So we still do it with the computer, and there's still been a data leak on there, and it goes in through this big com channel that has then all our communications on it, all the science data, all that still goes through the same link, but we just use a very small portion of it for what we need to do to get to the internet and to do our emails and to make the calls with. Next question. What were some of the most interesting things you observed in learning to live without gravity? That's definitely an interesting one. It's really big too. There's many different things you learn as you go, but I think the hardest thing for me to learn how to do, which is different than on Earth, is when you're working with tools, like we did that a lot, is not to lose your tools because you can't just set them down; they will float off in the way. Especially when you have a bunch of sockets or screwdrivers, etc., and all specialty parts and tools that you need to do the repair or whatever you're working on, and you have to make sure you keep all that contained. And it was very difficult at the beginning to learn how to do that. Keep all your tools in one area, not lose them all, only pull out one at a time. And I ended up having pants that I used that had pockets, but not just Velcro. They were zippered and they would close. They ended up being much better than Velcro on the pockets to hold them closed. And so those are the pants I end up wearing for most of the time up there just because of that zippered pocket. And I could keep a bunch of tools at one time in my pockets and know I wouldn't lose them with that. And then I wouldn't bring all the tools at once. I would look in the procedure, see what tools I needed for the first, say, half hour, grab all the tools for that, put them in my pockets, go do that work. And if I needed something else, I'd go back and change out a couple of tools and then go back and continue working. And that seemed to be the best thing for me. But it was quite a process to learn how to work in this environment where everything floats and just not to lose things and to keep track of all these little pieces of equipment while you're doing it. You just can't sit them down on a table kind of idea. And we would use, though, pretty much duct tape and do wrap it in circles and make it so it's like two-sided, put that against the wall, and little pieces like washers and stuff like that, little screws, we could use that to stay on the tape that way. So it was definitely this whole process you had to learn to be efficient and I guess good at working in space. Is there a limit to how many trips you can make? And yes, there is. It has nothing to do, I guess, more with the number of trips. It's the amount of time and space. It's the real limit. NASA has a limit on the amount of radiation. It's the same limit they use for workers in all sorts of radiation, from like nuclear power plants to all sorts of different things. But it's an increase in the chance of getting cancer of 3% over your lifetime, I believe is the way they state it. And so, and they have a calculation for that, and they measure how much radiation we get on each trip, and they keep track of that. And when you get to a certain point, they say basically you're done, you have to hit your radiation limit, and that's what stops you from going again. And so that's kind of the idea now of what's a limiting factor on certain people. There's also the point after a while where you've had enough too, and you just, I think, or don't need to go back up for a while. Even though we love going back up, sometimes when you get a certain age, I'm sure another 6 months in space, which is not so easy to do, could be a little more difficult than you want to deal with. Is there a hierarchy on the space station? Not really. I mean, there is a commander of the space station, but for day-to-day tasks, everybody's kind of on their own for the day-to-day tasks, and there's no set like somebody really who's directing people to exactly what to do. It's more mission control direct us what to do. If there's any situation comes up like an emergency or there's conflict or something like that, that's when the commander comes in and starts running the show. But until that time, pretty much everybody's on their own, doing their work, and so we don't really have a hierarchy at that point at all. Did I have a favorite view from space? Oh man, looking back at Earth, there's so many good views. It's hard to come up with a favorite, but I think a couple of them would be the areas where you can really see island chains in crystal blue water, kind of like the Caribbean or the South Pacific, the Maldives, all that kind of area. It was just amazing to see the colors of the water and you can even see the sand formations underneath the low or shallow water. It was really I think really pretty, and that was fantastic. I mean, mountains and rivers, everything are all fantastic. Deserts are really great too, but that was just a really spectacular view of our planet. Can I speak a little bit about the need for space policy to protect the equipment, missions, and lives of astronauts? I guess behind the scenes facets of space travel. Well, I guess I'm not an expert on space policy, but what I can tell you is that NASA has sort of rules for human spaceflight. The rocket you're on has to have so much redundancy, has to have so much capability. Same with any spaceship, all the stuff that goes up, all has to meet all these requirements set by NASA. Most space agencies have these same requirements. We've kind of developed them together. So we're all pretty equal in what we think is safe for human travel. Of course, there's going to be risk, but we have to make it as safe as we can and still get the job done. So we definitely have all that. Now the policy kind of more goes into almost nation to nation and figuring out like who owns what in space and all that. And there are groups who work on that, like different orbits, who owns access to certain orbits and all these kind of things. And they meet and they talk and they work it all out. Each country has a set of things areas of space actually around Earth that they have or own. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know much of details about all that. I just know it's there and it works. I'm sure there was probably some conflicts, of course, all that, but it's something at least in place to handle that. And I know we're looking now towards that on the Moon and Mars, etc. But to get everybody to follow suit, this might be a little difficult, but it's something that people are working on at this time to try to make sure everybody does this in a safe and responsible way for space travel. Is there anything you learned in space that has a continuing impact on your life now on Earth? Oh man, another tough question. I would definitely say ability to endure somewhat of a hardship. I learned how to do that. It was not that difficult, I guess, in a way, because knew what we were getting into. But it was something, 6 months on board in isolation, something you had to get used to, you had to deal with, and so that idea kind of helps now in the situation we have now. I say besides that, though, one thing I took, I think, when you look back on our planet, it's so beautiful and also so fragile at the same time. We definitely get more of a feeling about how we need to protect our planet. And that, I think, almost every astronaut comes back with this idea that is a very, very important. Our planet is fragile and we need to protect it. We need to take care of our planet. It's the only one we have. It is a little small spaceship in this huge, vast universe. And that universe is very, very harsh. And if we don't have our little spaceship, we are not going to make it. So that's just something it really is brought right forward into your thinking when you're out there and you realize that as you look back at Earth, how fragile it is. So that's something I think ever sticks with everybody. I hope that was helpful and I hope you enjoyed it all. And I'm sure there'll be other ones that are being really good things to listen to. Take care. Bye bye.